What's up, scholars? Welcome back to another video. Today I am here to talk about the One Piece live actions episodes 5 through 8. So I've already done episodes 1 through 4. If you haven't seen that, make sure you go check out that video. But today we're talking about One Piece live action again. And I can say without a doubt in my mind that these 4 episodes were my favorite in the series. As much as I absolutely love Buggy, he cannot win over Sanji in my eyes. I'm sorry. Taz did a great job as Sanji too. He played Sanji so perfectly. So Taz won my heart as Sanji in this live action. So as much as I love Buggy, as much as I love Buggy's entrance and like the whole takeover that he has over the internet right now, Sanji is still my favorite. That shouldn't be a surprise to anybody that Sanji is still my favorite, even in the live action. But yes, these were my favorite episodes, largely because of Sanji, but also because they had, this set of episodes had the most emotional and impactful moments in the series, in my opinion. And I think they handled them so well. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Oh, I'm so excited! We're starting at episode 5 after Luffy's group and they get away from Garp and they're in this fog. They come across the Baratier. And I love the crew dynamics, how Usopp is always gassing Luffy up, like when they go to try to get a table and they can't because, oh, the place is full. And Usopp tries to gas Luffy up by going up to the host and be like, well, you don't want to turn down the future king of the pirates, do you? And the host is just over all of it, but Luffy's really happy that Usopp is doing this, and then Nami has to slip him money afterwards, be like, I'm sorry, they're idiots. Their whole dynamic is so funny when they get at the table and they're all talking, and then we get to meet Sanji, and he's in the kitchen at first, and he's making this food, and he's doing it very classy, and he's really honoring the food that he has, even though it's not really on the menu, and that's what gets him in trouble with Zeph, because they're just there to cook what's on the menu, and that's what he needs to do, and because he's not, Zeph sends him out onto the line. Just that first scene alone with Sanji really sold me on his character, because you could tell he had it down. The essence of who Sanji is, his love and appreciation for food and for cooking, and his relationship dynamic with Zeph was already established in those first few minutes of his introduction. As soon as I saw that, I was completely sold on Taz's interpretation of Sanji. It took just that 1 or 2 minutes tops. But then we get Sanji coming up to the group and, really giving them the hard sell, as Nami says, welcoming them into the restaurant. And then, as I love it, he has the charm. He's got the charm, okay? And I will say, he's got the charm. There were a couple moments in the live action that was like, Sanji, you need to chill. Like, not because he was like doing too much, but it was just like, I can't take this. Like, he was just so smooth with it. Completely smooth. He got me. I was won over within seconds. As soon as he looked at Nami and he turned the charm on, he started smiling, saying, apologies, madam. I was done. I was done from that moment. It did not take long for Sanji to win me over. But I loved how he turned the charm on with Nami and how he was talking to her and really favoring her more than the others. He wasn't really paying the guys attention. He wanted to do something special for Nami, just like Sanji does in the manga, and it just, it was so perfect. And then, of course, more of the crew dynamics. They're teasing Nami. Nami's got a boyfriend. It was so perfect. I loved it. And Zoro repeatedly calling her madam. And Luffy just kind of looking lost but laughing around anyways. Was so funny. The crew dynamic was so good, and you got to see how much they were bonding with one another and how much Nami specifically was really getting attached to this crew, how much she really liked them. And it gets shown further as they're going into the night, because Luffy, of course, tries to do the IOU tab. That does not fly with Zeph, so he gets taken into the kitchen. They're all just hanging out while Luffy's trying to do chores and not doing them very well because it's Luffy. And then Nami and Zoro have this little drinking game where they try to guess things about each other and they're getting to know one another better. It was a really cool bonding moment that they had that I actually really liked that they added. I really liked that part with them. And then, of course, we get one of the funniest little bits of Usopp drinking a little too much. And he's dancing on the floor and he's talking all this big talk, and then he ends up talking big right in front of Mihawk, who Garp had actually sent to Baradier instead of Mihawk following Don Krieg. So there was a nod to Don Krieg, and we saw Mihawk face him, and he disposed of him right then and there. But since Don Krieg didn't show up in Baradier, there needed to be a different reason for Mihawk to be there. So I can see why they had Garp call Mihawk in. But Usopp's just blabbing all of this stuff, and Mihawk overhears, and Zoro notices who he is, and he challenges Mihawk to a duel. I will say the actor they got from Mihawk is just perfect. He is perfect as Mihawk. The looks, the expressions, the line delivery, everything about Mihawk's character is perfect. I really, really liked him. But Mihawk accepts Zoro's challenge, and Nami is trying so hard to dissuade this fight and trying to get Luffy to talk Zoro out of it because she doesn't see how this could go well, and she's upset that nobody's really listening to her, that they would let Zoro do this dangerous thing, and Zoro talking about like why she's so worried, and Nami saying it's because you're my friend, and Zoro of course has to be like, well, you said you didn't have any friends. And so we get this confliction with Nami in this instance, and I actually kind of like how they changed this. Instead of Nami going off and like taking the Mary and going to Arlong Park because she saw his wanted poster, they had her stay and witness all of this and then leave with Arlong later. I actually am okay with that change because it gives us the ability to see more of the confliction between what she wants to do and what she needs to be doing. So it's really nice to see that kind of dynamic play out, and how she's talking to Zoro, how she ends up reading him, well, I'm skipping ahead, but how she ends up reading him Nolan the Liar's tale to Zoro after he loses to Mihawk, which, first of all, I love the nod to Skypiea with Nolan the Liar. I love that. I love the little hints and foreshadowing that they put in there for us. It just makes me so happy. I love it. But yes, so we actually get to see more of Nami's love for this crew before she's part of the crew, essentially. We get to see how much they mean to her before the whole instance in Arlong Park happens. So I'm actually okay with that change. Like, yes, they had a change a lot with like Don Krieg and Sanji's story, like the Sanji's fights against Gin. Gin was like barely vaguely mentioned, and he had like the similar role of he needed food and Sanji was going to cook for him regardless of if, you know, Zeph had told him to stay off the line, regardless of if he had money. It was a hungry person. Sanji was going to feed him, and Luffy got to see him do that. So there was still that, but besides that moment, Gin wasn't really a character, which is a little bit of a disservice because of how much he does with the whole dynamic with Sanji, showing Sanji's kindness and how, you know, Sanji feeding someone really persuades their actions, and, you know, the conflict that Gin feels after Sanji did that for him when Don Krieg comes. So that little bit is missing, but Sanji's kindness is shown in a different way after Zoro is injured. Whenever Luffy comes in and says that Zoro is injured, and Zeph's trying to be like, sorry, we can't help you, Sanji acts immediately and starts gathering materials to take, and he says, there's someone injured, I'm gonna help him. So with that, that moment really shows Sanji's kindness where it was cut with Gin. So I really did like that. They did kind of add something in there since they weren't having Gin be a major character because they weren't having Dog Creek be a major character. But they still found a way to add some of that back in. So I really did appreciate how they handled it. I got a little off track there. I was just like following one line of thought and just got way off course. But yes, the fight with Zoro and Mihawk was fantastic. It looked so good. The choreography was great. Just how Mihawk was taking care of Zoro, just light work, was portrayed really well. And I did say, the amount of disrespect with the little knife that Mihawk has with Zoro was super disrespectful in the manga and the anime, but it somehow looked even more disrespectful in the live action. I guess it's just because of like in the actual media and everything. Like it's just, I was like, wow, that really just hits home of how disrespectful Mihawk is being to Zoro right now. Like, that's so funny. It just added a lot to me. It added a lot to me, but in that moment because it did. It just looked wild in the live action to have a tiny little knife against Zoro's 3 swords, and you know Mihawk's lines stay the same, and Zoro is feeling frustrated at Mihawk's lack of interaction and engagement with the fight. I loved that fight, and I will say, after Zoro gets cut down and he gets Mihawk's respect, McKinyu nails it. I was a little worried because, one, this is like Zoro's big moment in the East Blue Saga. This is his moment pretty much. And I was a little worried because of the stoicness McKinyu had presented up until then. There was like a few moments of humor where, you know, he would smile or chuckle or anything, but we hadn't really seen any big emotions from him. But he delivered. He delivered, and then some. The emotion, the impact of his words, how he said the words, the promise he makes to Luffy was so good. It was so impactful, very emotional. It hit home, and I just think they handled it so well. And I will say, after Zoro gets cut down and they're worried about him, they actually go into the fact that they are worried for this man's health and safety instead of just letting him bleed out in like in the anime and manga, and they're just like, oh, we'll wrap him up a little bit, he'll be fine. No, they're like, oh, he could die, we need to get him help. So that is kind of a more realistic attribute that they put into the live action, so I appreciate that they did that. But what I liked about that was we got an early glimpse, and I appreciate how the writers were able to show this, because we got an early glimpse at what I think is one of Luffy's biggest fears that we don't really see until later on, and like starting in like Water 7 and forward like that, going into Sabody and Marineford and all of that, like post-war, like Luffy's fear of losing someone and his fear of being alone. And Yaki did a really good job of kind of showing that subtle fear, that subtle feeling of not exactly knowing what to do, not trusting his gut, not knowing how to react in this situation. We get to see that so early on in the live action. When I was watching that, I was like, wow, they're actually showing that side of Luffy. And I really, really liked it. I liked how they showed that side of Luffy because of the way he was trying to interact with Zoro and being like, oh, well, no, he's gonna be fine. He's gonna be fine. There's nothing wrong. And then that kind of like internalized panic that you can see in his eyes, and Yaki did such a great job of just expressing it through his eyes and his facial features, of him being like, oh, we could actually lose somebody. my actions, or maybe lack of actions as captain, because I'm still very new at this captain thing, might actually cause someone I care about to die. And we really get to kind of tease that dynamic and tease that emotional turmoil that Luffy has, and I think that was wonderful. I think that was a wonderful addition because yeah, we get to see that a lot in the manga later on, and it just kills me whenever it happens. So seeing it this early was like an unnecessary like hit to the heart. I was like, okay, ow, this hurts. I really like that, especially coupled with, you know, Nami getting onto Luffy for not talking Zoro out of it, Usopp kind of not knowing what to do, and Luffy not knowing what to do. They're relying on Zeph and Sanji to kind of patch Zoro up so that he can rest and that he's gonna be okay. And then you have Nami talking to Zoro as he's sleeping, and Luffy's kind of sitting there not knowing what to say, unable to have the words to talk to him properly. And he keeps trying to talk to Zoro, then he stops and he starts over, then he tries to do it again. I loved that part. I loved it. It was one of my favorite moments from the Baratier arc in the live action. I really, really loved how they added that. Because, you know, it's always good to be hit in the feels by Oda and his characters. So I really appreciated that they did that so early on. I really liked that. But then, of course, speaking of being a captain, or what a captain means, we get that conversation with Sanji and Luffy. And you can already tell the found family dynamics are definitely set in place in One Piece, both in the manga, anime, but in the live action as well. You could already see where it's coming into place. And Sanji really steps in as like this big brother to Luffy, like immediately a big brother figure. And he sits down with Luffy, I think he's cooking, and he talks to Luffy about, you know, what acting as a captain means, what making those decisions mean. And then he tells his backstory with Zeph and how Zeph made the decision of a captain, talking through that with Luffy. And I love that. I love that dynamic. And I will say, Sanji's backstory was my favorite backstory in the entire live action. First of all, they kept it true to the manga, which I was pleasantly surprised with, because I wasn't sure if they were going to interpret it the way the anime did, to kind of tone it down a little bit, but no. No, they did not. They went full leg cutting off and eating it, and I appreciated that they did that. I loved Sanji's backstory. The child actor that they got for Sanji was amazing. He did such a great job handling that heavy backstory, because that is a tough backstory to try to act out. I mean, for anybody, let alone a child, to be acting that out, he did phenomenal with it. I was so impressed by the level of acting, the the authenticity, I don't know why I couldn't say that word, and just the emotions that they were able to draw out between Zeph and Sanji was so amazing. I loved that backstory, the way they handled it, the scenes for it, how emotional it was, the final confrontation with Zeph and Sanji when Sanji tries to go steal Zeph's food and he realizes he doesn't have any food, and Sanji realizing that Zeph ate his own leg. That was very powerful. They handled it perfectly. I have absolutely no complaints for Sanji's backstory. It was my favorite. They did fantastic on it. And Zeph's actor, 10 out of 10. He's great. He's fantastic. He makes the perfect Zeph. And I love him. And he did such a great job too. And they really nailed the Sanji and Zeph dynamic. I got too excited waving around my hands and I guess pulled a muscle. That sounds so pathetic. The dynamic between Zeph and Sanji was perfect. I loved every interaction they had. I loved the backstory. Everything about it was just perfect to me. I'm also just a smidge partial to Sanji and Zeph because that was the first backstory in One Piece to make me cry whenever I was first going through it. So I'm a little partial to Zeph and Sanji's backstory and their interactions, and because Sanji is one of my all-time favorite One Piece characters, I'm just a tad partial to him, but that's fine. It's besides the point. After Sanji finishes his backstory and he tells Luffy, that really brings a lot of camaraderie between them, and Luffy sees Sanji as like an older brother figure, and he has a lot of respect for Sanji. He already had a lot of respect for Sanji when he saw Sanji fight in the Baratier, or when he saw Sanji, you know, feed this person that he didn't even know, and they had that conversation about the all blue. So Sanji already had a lot of respect for Luffy, but after hearing this backstory and hearing Sanji kind of explain like how Zeph took the role of the captain and what he did with that, what it means, and what it means to make these decisions, I think that meant a lot to Luffy as well. I really love Luffy and Sanji's dynamic in this. It's so precious. You can really tell the entire cast, like the entire main cast, has great chemistry on and off the set, because I've seen plenty of the behind the scenes and like the extras that they've had come out. The cast is so perfect together, and seeing them on set, you can feel that chemistry just adding up to really portray these characters even better. I really love the chemistry they have together, and I really love the dynamic between Luffy and Sanji in the live action. I thought they handled that really well. Then we get another big Zoro moment when he is waking up. I know I'm skipping around a lot, it's fine. When Zoro wakes back up and he looks at Luffy and he says, "You are my captain from now until forever," or something along those lines. I thought that was such a good moment for Zoro. It just kind of solidifies that he has found and placed Luffy in his life as his captain, that it is not just his dreams that he is after now, it is Luffy's dream. He is going to follow Luffy to the ends of the earth, and that loyalty has been firmly established. I love it. I also love when Zoro is first waking up and Luffy is just like standing over him. He's like, "Oh, Zoro!" and he like leans down to give him a hug, and Zoro's just like in pain, and he's like, "Oh my gosh." That's so perfect. The perfect Luffy and Zoro dynamic. I love it so much. It's great. It's perfect. But then we get Arlong showing up to Baratier, which I figured was gonna happen because Don Creek was no longer there and Mihawk had already left. So there had to be something to bring them to Arlong Park. Who better to do it than Arlong himself? And he shows up. I'm sorry, I will say, I just have to say it once. Some of the fishmen look really goofy. Like, I knew they would. But some of them look kind of goofy, and I get it, I really do, because there are a lot of fish in the ocean that look really goofy. Like, have you seen some of the fish that are in the ocean? Like, pictures of them. They look really weird. There are a lot of really weird fish in the ocean, and there's a lot of creepy and scary fish in the ocean as well. So the fact that the fishmen look kind of weird and creepy and scary fits very well. And I know they have to do like the size proportionings a lot differently because of like the live action scaling and everything. I was curious to know if they were going to do something sort of like they did in like Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit, where they kind of used CGI and green screen and those effects to make Gandalf look taller than the dwarves and The Hobbit. But they didn't, but that's okay. I just didn't know if they were going to be able to use effects like that, but I still think Arlong looked fine. Arlong looked great. And the actor who played Arlong, he did a great job. He did a good job portraying Arlong, especially like working through the prosthetics and everything. He did a great job with that. I will say, She looks so goofy. But like, in the best way, because I was just like, oh my gosh, that's Chew. And he would look like that in real life, and it just cracked me up, and it made me laugh. It made me laugh. That's the last I'll say on like how the fishmen look. I just wanted to make that point that one time that they do look a little goofy. But that's okay. One Piece is a goofy show. But Arlong also shows up with Buggy because he had talked to Buggy about the map and all of that. So he has Buggy with him. And somehow the Straw Hats end up with Buggy's head. And just his head, his body's in Arlong Park. So Buggy, of course, is going to go to Arlong Park with us, which I was like, this definitely wasn't in the anime and manga, but I am so happy it's in the live action because more time with Buggy is just time well spent. No matter who you are, no matter how he's involved, time with Buggy is time well spent. Arlong shows up and he beats Luffy quite easily and drops him in the water because Nami convinces Arlong to let him go. She has the map. She's gonna go back with him. She tries to say she tricked Luffy, that she was in it for the long con, and she successfully did her con, so now she's gonna go back to Lee because she's part of Arlong's crew. So we have that revealed there. And then Sanji saves Luffy from the water, which is similar to how he saved Luffy in the original manga and anime, though it's a different circumstance. He still has to go in and save him. That was a great moment for many reasons. But after that, they decide that they're all gonna go get Nami back. But Sanji is trying to stay behind. He's wanting to help Zeph clean up. He's taking on his duties as normal. And Zeph and Sanji's argument, their conversation, was so good. And I love how Zeph was like, no, staying here is quitting. Staying here is giving up. And he's really trying to persuade Sanji to join Luffy, to join and go on this adventure to find the All Blue. And yes, it's harsh, but it was harsh in the anime and the manga. But Zeph knows it has to be because that's the only way to get Sanji to leave. And then when Sanji joins up, the goodbye to Zeph, it hit. It hit. I cried. Just. Taz did a great job with Sanji's farewell to Zeph. And Zeph, I can't remember his actor's name, but he did a great job whenever he said, make sure you keep your feet dry. that got me, and it still does. And it hit so much. It hit, and it was so good. I think Sanji's arc was my favorite because the emotions were there. They were always present, and they did such a great job with them and with the story between Sanji and Zeph, and it just was perfectly delivered. I loved their goodbye. It was amazing. And then they're off to Arlong Park. And when we get to Arlong Park, there's a lot of differences. First and foremost being that nobody in the village knows that Nami is doing this to save them. They kept that a secret, which makes her and Nojiko's relationship a whole lot different. It makes her and Gin's relationship a whole lot different. And seeing Nami act two ways when she's with Arlong and his crew, between to where she is with like how she's acting with Cocoa Village, they're very different. So it definitely shows how much she's acting, how much she is putting on this facade in order to do what she needs to do so she can buy this village back from Arlong. Now, I will say Nami's backstory with Belmere was really good. It was really good. They handled it well. There was a few moments, bigger moments that they changed a little bit that I think could have been done a little bit differently. Belmere's final goodbye saying that she loves them, but she's hiding them behind her back so that they can't see her, like in the anime and the manga, or in the manga. But I still think, and there's a few things changed in the backstory, but I still think they handled it really well. Nami's child actor did a really good job She did a really great job with what she was given and what she was supposed to do. She did it, and she did it good. She did it very good. And I love how in the present it still shows the sliminess of Arlong, where he knows Nami has the money and she can give it to him. She just has to go grab it. And he gets that Navy man, the Nezumi, I almost said Nezuko, Nezumi, to, you know, basically take that money away because he doesn't want to give Nami up. He doesn't want to give Cocoa Village up, so he's finding a way around that promise that he made her while still remaining true to his word. I really like how they kept that dynamic, and they really nailed it. They nailed it really well between Arlong and Nezumi and Nami. They did a great job. And then we get the Straw Hats coming in to trying to find out what's happening. You have this confrontation with Luffy and Nami, how Nami is trying to say like that she never wants to see them again. She tricked them. She doesn't want to be around them. She's not part of their crew. They just need to leave. And Luffy's like, you don't mean that. I love that dynamic. I love Luffy's just like, no, like he can tell there's something else there, even though he doesn't know what it is. He's just like, no, that's not right. And then they go to talk to Nojiko about Nami to find out what happened. And I will say, Sanji was so smooth with it, with Nojiko and all that, when she was trying to get them to leave because she didn't want to talk to them about Nami. And then he's like, well, if I cook for you, we can exchange information. Sir! And he was so smooth with it. And then she was just like completely won over by his cooking, which I'm like, yes, of course, because he's the greatest cook in the East Blue, as Usopp says. Usopp really gassed him up. I was like, what a great wingman. I love him. Sanji like buttered up Nojiko, and they figured out what was going on with Nami because he made good food. And once they figured it out, that's when they kind of like go through. And I really like how after they realize what Nami's doing, or what they think Nami's doing, Luffy goes up to the roof and Zoro sees him and follows him, and the other two stay put. It's like a captain first mate meeting, and they sit there and they talk. I really like that because it shows the positions in the crew that Zoro is Luffy's first mate. He is his right-hand man, and I really liked that. But I do like how Arlong Park is actually a park. And knowing what we know from Sabaody and Fishman Island about how they wanted an actual park that they were able to go to, seeing Arlong Park as an actual park makes so much sense. And I actually really like that they did that they added that little feature, because it feels natural, it feels authentic to the story and what Arlong's purpose and motivations are. We actually get more of the Fishman persecution in the East Blue than we did in the manga and anime, but I think that's for a reason. They wanted to set up as much as possible just in case, and I get it. So I think they handled it really well. The one complaint I have with Arlong Park, Hachi wasn't there. I was really, really waiting for my lovable octopus man. I really was. And I don't know what they're gonna do if they ever go like further down the line to like Sabaody or Fishman Island or anything like that, because how are they gonna handle that? But I guess that's a question for later, which is okay. Yeah, Hachi was really the only one I was missing, and that was my biggest thing. I was like, I don't see Hachi anywhere. The little party that Arlong throws was really funny. Some of the Fishman dancing kind of made me giggle. It was really funny to see that. It just kind of just made me chuckle. It was so funny. And I've seen so many memes about that party. So it's been fun. It's been a delight. People are definitely having their fun with this live action, but in a very positive way. So I'm very happy about that. They're taking this very well. They do show that Nojiko ends up finding out. Nami ends up telling Nojiko about what she's done, and they have a talk as sisters for the first time in so many years, and it really shows the way that Nami's been carrying, and how Nojiko is like, you've let me hate you all this time, and Nami's just like, I know. That moment was really good between them. And then when Nezumi comes and takes Nami's gold away, I really love the scene as she's running in the dark and the music is playing, it's building up, and she's thinking of Arlong this entire time, what Arlong's doing, his laugh, everything that she's been through, everything that she's done all these years, and what he's done to her. And finally, she collapses, and we get the famous scene. Emily nailed it. She nailed it perfectly. The emotion, the anger, the sadness, just all of it wrapped up. How she stabbed her. I was worried if they were actually going to show that part because it's so like graphic and everything, but they did. She stabbed herself several times in the arm, you know, and she's screaming Arlong's name, and then Luffy comes and stops her, and you have her telling Luffy that she's like, I told you to leave, you don't know anything what's going on here. And then she turns and asks Luffy to help her. It was perfect. It was very, very emotional. I cried. It got me. Her acting got me. It was so good. And then Luffy putting the hat on Nami, saying, of course I will. And we get that epic scene of the crew, all the guys ready to go to war for Nami. And they're just like, all right, let's go. I loved that frame of them all sitting there and they're ready to go. Luffy saying, let's go. And they are off to Arlong Park. We don't get the famous walk scene with the overtaken OST or anything like that, but I think that's okay. I like how they changed where Nami actually goes with them and she's present when Luffy breaks into Arlong Park and demands to see Arlong, and they all start fighting. Arlong Park definitely had the best fight scenes, like Luffy versus Arlong, Zoro and Sanji versus all those fishmen, and I will say Usopp versus Chu was perfect. I love so much that they kept Usopp running away and Chu chasing him. I adored that fight in the anime and the manga because I love Usopp. I loved this fight in the live action. It was so perfect. It was great. I love Usopp. Jacob does a fantastic job with him. And he nailed this fight. I love that fight. That was one of my favorite fights just because, it's perfect. The fights were great. The duo with Sanji and Zoro fighting together but also bickering with one another the entire time, saying like, well, I had that one, well, if you had him, I wouldn't have got him. And Sanji being like, you tired or something? Maybe you should take a break. The banter is so good between them. And they're fighting, they're taking out all these fishmen, and I love how Sanji calls out his finishing moves and he defeats that big fishman with the Mouton shot, and then Zoro tries to make fun of him for the Mouton shot, and Sanji's like, all great fighters call out their finishing move, echoing what Luffy said in episode 1, and Zoro looks at him and is like, yeah, you're gonna fit in just fine. I love that moment. That moment cracked me up and had me laughing so much. I love their dynamic. Their fight scenes were great. Luffy protecting and defending Nami from Arlong when they were looking for the maps and everything was amazing. They kept Luffy breaking Arlong's saw, and their fight was amazing. And oh, what was it? When Luffy throws his foot through the air up to the building and brings it down. Oh, what's it called? But I don't remember what the move is called. I had it and then I just forgot it. But whenever he does that, that emotion, the yell that Iñaki gives as Luffy was perfect. That was my favorite move called out by Iñaki in the series. You could feel the emotion, the energy behind that yell. Amazing. amazing. I loved it. He beats Arlong, and I love how they kept the same format for him beating Arlong. They didn't really change any of that. They even kept Arlong's teeth growing back, which looked so nasty in live action. Like, I saw that and I was like, bleh! Like, ugh. Seeing it animated is one thing because it doesn't look as gross. Seeing it in like live action, like actually happening, that was disgusting. But they even kept that in. Luffy still beats Arlong the same exact way, and when the building collapses and he rises from the rubble and he shouts down to Nami saying, "You are our friend." And I love that moment. You get Nami really emotional. She's crying, but she's also smiling and laughing. The others are there smiling and laughing with her, and it just solidifies them as a crew and as a group. I love it. And then we get the celebration in Cocoa Village afterwards, and I will say, Sanji and Zoro's dynamic again cracks me up every time. How Zoro comes back for seconds and Sanji teases him about it, and Zoro tries to downplay how good the cooking is. So funny. But then somebody needs to tell Sanji to stop. Like, he's too smooth. When he's talking to Nochiko and she's like, "Oh, well, you should, you know, like, write your own cookbook or something," which I think is a great nod to the cookbook that Sanji actually does have. Yes, I have it right back there, and I like their recipes. When she says that, and he's like, "Oh, well, you know, chef can't give away his secrets, but I could be talked into offering some private lessons." Sir? I would have folded right there. Like, he was so smooth with it. And I was just like, Sanji, you need to stop, and also don't stop. It was great. I love it. I love their dynamic. Nami watching on, and she's smiling, she's happy. And then you get Usopp telling these great tales, and then he's like, "Well, I wasn't really completely alone." And then you get the crew gassing him up, and they're like, "Yeah, go Captain Usopp," or something like that. And they're gassing your boy up, and he is just grinning and enjoying the limelight. I love this crew. They did such a great job getting this crew down. Perfect. It was so perfect. And then you get Garp coming in and confronting Luffy. Their whole fight, of course, Garp makes light work of Luffy because it's Garp. Luffy, of course, is not going to stand a chance against Garp. But Garp basically is like, he tests Luffy to see if Luffy is actually serious about pursuing this dream, about being a pirate and going down this path. He wanted to make sure Luffy was absolutely sure this is what he wanted to do because of how dangerous and perilous a road this is. And when Luffy doesn't back down, Garp is just like, "Alright then, just making sure." And that's pretty much it. He's just like, "Yeah, I just wanted to test you. Make sure, you know, you're serious about this." So I liked that conclusion to the whole Garp storyline. Is just he was wanting to test Luffy to make sure Luffy was serious about being a pirate and going down this path. And once Luffy proved himself to him, he backed off and was like, "Alright, see you later." Then we get, of course, the famous scene with Mihawk and Shanks, where Luffy finally gets his bounty. He gets his first picture on a bounty, on a wanted poster, and it starts spreading around. Everybody starts to see it. Everybody starts to know about it. And Mihawk brings it to Shanks, and he's like, "You might be interested in this boy you told me about long ago." And Shanks sees it, he's like, "That's Luffy!" And everybody in Shanks' crew starts hyping Luffy up, and Shanks and Mihawk have a drink together. And then you get Buggy. After he escaped from Arlong Park, he got his body back and then just dipped, which is so Buggy-like. I love that for him. Buggy sees Luffy's bounty and is very upset because Luffy has a bigger bounty than him. And that's when he runs into Alvida. I like how they still keep those two meeting. That's very good. So those two meet up. And then Luffy realizes he has a bounty. He's all hyped up about it. Usopp points out that he is still very much in the back of Luffy's poster, and we see Kaya back on Syrup Village. She sees the bounty. Yeah, she sees the bounty and notices Usopp and gets really happy about it. I love all of that tie-in. And then they set off towards the Grand Line, and we get that big barrel scene. I will say, the way they handled the barrel scene in the live action was amazing. It was so perfect. It was emotional. It was inspiring and made you look forward to what was coming next. I was happy looking at them saying their dreams and putting their foot on the barrel, proclaiming it to the world, proclaiming it to each other. And then they're setting off, and then they had "We Are." It was amazing. I like how they wrapped it up, and it leads perfectly into a season 2, which I've heard rumors that there might already be if certain circumstances work out very well in the writer's favors. We have the talks of a season 2 at least, which I am really, really hoping for, because all in all, this live action was amazing. I enjoyed it. I loved every bit of it. Yes, there were some parts I had like little nitpicks and, you know, complaints about here and there, but other than that, I mean, it's still great. I love it. I love it. It was so good. The acting was great. The casting, I can't talk enough about the casting. The casting was perfect. The casting is the highlight of this live action, to be completely honest. They had the perfect cast, in my opinion. Casting was perfect. I love the sets. The music was good. My Sails Are Set is now like my favorite song. I have been playing it on repeat. The costume design, the set designs, the effects that they had were really good, and it just all came together so well for this first season. And I think they did a good job handling the East Blue and condensing it down the way that they did. I understand why they had to cut some things, why they changed things around a little bit, but all in all, the changes worked. It worked. And I think the live action was really, really great. I'll just say Sanji, Buggy, and Usopp are in my top 3 for the live action, which is to be expected because I love those characters. I really, really love this live action. I honestly thought they did a spectacular job with it, and I'm really looking forward to seeing where it goes from here, because I think we will get a season 2. I'm really hoping we get a season 2. But what do y'all think of the live action as a whole? What did you think of this section of this section of episodes? Wow. These sections of episodes were my favorite. I really enjoyed them. But what did y'all think about them? What was y'all's favorite part of the live action as a whole? Mine was still probably Sanji's backstory and then Nami's help me moment. Those were like my favorite moments in the East Blue, just as they were in the manga, so it doesn't, I mean, they stayed the same for me. But I'd love to know what your thoughts are on it. Let me know down below. And other than that, make sure you are on the lookout for my Dressrosa review that will be coming out Thursday. So be on the lookout for that. This is going to be a very heavily themed One Piece month content-wise, so be prepared. Other than that, thank you all so much for watching this video, and I will see you next time, scholars. Bye!